In today's video, I'll be reviewing my own 2024 election predictions on the presidential level, the House level, as well as the Senate level, and answering the question, how accurate was I in the 2024 election cycle? Let's start off here with the presidential election. I got 49 of the 50 states right in my final 2024 presidential election prediction. In the penultimate one, I actually got all 50 states right. By my final prediction, I decided to give Kamala Harris the win in the state of Michigan. I actually believed that at the time that Donald Trump was going to win, but I wanted to look a bit more impartial, and I thought that that might be a way to do it. Turns out I was actually wrong, and in fact, my gut instinct of Michigan going red for the Republican Party was right, but nevertheless here I got 49 out of 50, or a 98% accuracy. That isn't super bad. I think that's pretty good. A lot of the mainstream media thought that Harris was actually slightly favored, and there were a lot of people who had the numbers way off. Generally, people though in this election were more or less accurate, but I think that this prediction was ultimately pretty good. We're going to compare this with the final election results here, and you can see that it was more or less on par with the final results. For example, in the swing states here, I was essentially right in essentially all of them. And North Carolina, Georgia, Nevada, all as lead Republican, that was right. Pennsylvania and Wisconsin were also tilt Republican, and I was right about that based on my own margins. 2 of the 7 states I got wrong in terms of the final margin. Arizona, I had that as lead Republican. I said Trump was going to win Arizona by about 3 to 4%. We look at reality land, he won by about 5.5, which is quite a bit larger than my overall expectation, but that wasn't ridiculously off. If you go to Michigan here, I had Trump, I believe, losing by 0.5%. He wanted to stay by a little bit under 1.5%, so still a decent prediction. I was off by about 2%, but of course I did call it incorrectly, and I take responsibility for that. Now, the margins where I was wrong, it was not really the swing states. Again, Minnesota, that was pretty accurate. I had Harris winning by 3 to 4. Virginia, I had Harris winning by 5 to 6. That was pretty accurate. Nebraska second, I had Harris winning by 3 to 4. That was also decently accurate. New Hampshire, I had her winning by 3 to 4. That was also decently accurate. The part I did end up getting wrong, and I do take responsibility for that, were some of the pretty safe red states and some of the pretty safe blue states. Specifically, I had Texas and Florida going for Trump by about 10%, but they went for Trump by a bit more than that, 14 in Texas and essentially 14 in the state of Florida. As well as that, in some of the big blue states here, New Jersey, I had Harris winning here by 12. She only won the state by 6. New York, I had Harris winning by 15. She won by 12. Rhode Island, Connecticut, I had her winning by about 15 to 16. She won by lesser of that margin. So that was where I did get some of the state results inaccurately, but generally my prediction I would say was pretty good. Now, all in all, when you look at my prediction, there was actually one part that I really did miss, and that was the popular vote. Although I never actually made this prediction, I thought that Harris was going to win the popular vote by about 1.5%, which would equate to just over 2 million votes. However, the opposite happened, and Donald Trump was able to win the popular vote by 1.5%, or about 2.28 million votes or so, which was the area I did end up making an inaccurate prediction in. That was probably because I didn't expect Kamala Harris to do so poorly in some of the big states. You look at the state of New York, right? You saw some very huge shifts around New York City, and as well as that in New Jersey. I think that was pretty unexpected for most people. Detroit, there was a big shift there. Cook County, which is Chicago, there was a big shift there, and we saw some huge shifts in areas like Los Angeles County, in and around San Francisco, where Kamala Harris actually served as Attorney General. And we also saw in Imperial County in particular a 25% shift as opposed to 2020. Biden won the county with over 60% of the vote, but Kamala Harris actually lost the county overall. We also saw some major shifts in some of the states that were actually quote-unquote trending Democratic, especially in Texas, and in Florida there were some huge shifts in Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach, as well as some of the other counties across the state. So overall, my prediction across the popular vote was definitely off, but my state predictions were still quite accurate. So what grade would I give this? I probably give this about 85%, or about somewhere around an A-. My state-by-state predictions were really good, I would say, but my popular vote prediction wasn't great. By the end of the day, the U.S. presidential election is determined based on the states, and I'd say I get an A- for that. Now we move on to the Senate elections, where Republicans secured a 53 to 47 seat majority, flipping 4 seats from Democratic hands. Montana, Ohio, West Virginia, and the state of Pennsylvania. So all in all, my prediction for Senate, again, I had about 97% accuracy, calling 33 of the 34 races correctly. The race I did not call correctly was Pennsylvania, but that was the closest Senate race of any Senate race that was on the table in 2024. I don't think anybody called Pennsylvania correctly, except for people who drastically overestimated Republican support. People who called Pennsylvania for Dave McCormick generally also got Wisconsin and Michigan both incorrectly. My Senate prediction is based on what I've seen, one of the best out there. This is what it is. I did overestimate Democratic support in quite a few states, in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Nevada, and the state of Ohio. But generally, the prediction was definitely not bad, and I think it's still quite acceptable. The reason I got Pennsylvania wrong, I was too bullish on Bob Casey. Casey is an institution in Pennsylvania, and I thought that he was going to overrun essentially Kamala Harris down ballot by 3 to 4%. Turns out that didn't happen, and Bob Casey actually only overperformed the Democratic nominees down ballot, up the top of the ballot with Kamala Harris by about 1.5%. If you look at the Pennsylvania election results there, it was very competitive. We saw that Trump won by 1.7, and we see that Dave McCormick defeated Bob Casey by just 0.22%. It was a very hard race to predict. I did learn one lesson, though, is that Bob Casey did not do too well in the suburbs. He actually underperformed Kamala Harris there. For example, in Chester County, Harris won by 15, but Casey only won there by 12. So Casey definitely didn't do the best based on my own prediction, and I do take responsibility for that. Another race I did call incorrectly was Ohio, kind of. I think I had Sherrod Brown losing by about 1.5, but he lost by a bigger margin of about 3.5% or so if you look at the whole Ohio Senate race, by 3.6%. I thought Sherrod Brown was going to do better in some of the more working class areas, specifically Manhattan County, which was a county he actually won by 20% in 2018, just 6 years ago. Also in areas like Lake County, Ashtabula County, and Trumbull County, I thought Sherrod Brown would have a better performance. Turns out I was wrong there, and he lost by over 200,000 votes. The final prediction I was not too happy about on my own side here was essentially in the state of Florida. I definitely got something really wrong there, in my opinion. I did still have the Republican Rick Scott winning by around 10%, but still my prediction I would say was not ideal. You saw that Rick Scott won by about 13%, and he won Miami-Dade County by 10 points. He also won areas like Osceola County by about 2% or so, and that did surprise me. That was a prediction I was not super proud of, but my predictions generally were pretty good, and I don't find a lot of fault with it. I was also surprised by another outcome, though, that being in the state of Nebraska, where Dan Osborne actually made the race very competitive. I thought he was going to lose by about 10. He made the race within about a 6% margin, but still, that was a race that I predicted was not going to be super competitive, and I was right. And overall, the prediction wasn't that bad. I'd still give it around an 85% accuracy, or about an A-.